Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Marvel Snap video. Today, we're going to be talking about the new featured location, Collapse Mines. This isn't out yet, but it's going to be out today in a couple of hours. So, I figured I wanted to have an in depth description of this location, in-depth review, what cards you should be thinking about when making decks for this location, and a couple of decks and deck ideas for you guys to get started. So, as you can see, the location states you fill this location with rocks, skip return to destroy your rocks. So, when this flips over, either location 1, 2, or 3, all of the players, all the spots, the 4 spots are going to be filled with rocks. I mean, you know how it is. I don't have to say this, but like, it's going to be filled with rocks. If you want to get rid of the rocks, you have to skip a turn. So this is kind of a new mechanic, right? Filling your locations. There's always cards that do that, but being able to remove the cards that are filled, right? Like that's pretty new, right? There's not really any um, locations that really allow you to do that. There are, of course, cards that allow you to remove cards in your location, but not from a location itself, realistically. So this is a pretty interesting mechanic. It is, however, you know, part of the philosophy of Second Dinner to like every 2 locations they add, one has to help destroy decks. So this is really the same, right? Your rocks are destroyed, so that's gonna buff death, and it's really it's more of the same. But because of that, I would say there's a lot of answers that people have already brainstormed and come to a conclusion. So without further ado, we can kind of get into my current cards to think about when you're making decks, cards to watch. So here we have some important cards for She-Hulk. We can also see it here, where these are the 12 cards. Actually, I have 13, but I don't have She-Hulk, so it's not in here. But we have Nova, Sunspot Armor, Falcon, Patriot, Cosmo, Killmonger, Kazar, Blue Marvel, Claw, Infinite, and Death. So some of these are, might be obvious. Some of these are like, I haven't really thought about this, but we can kind of go in to them one by one and like why I think these are important cards to think about. So first of all, you have Nova, right? Nova is a pretty, standard card, but a lot of people are going to be running things like Killmonger. A lot of people are going to be running, you might be running Destroy decks yourself. So even if you don't even have any ways to trigger Nova, just because people are going to be playing Killmonger and things like that, you might actually just play a Nova, fish with it, see if people are going to play their Killmongers, and you get a free power boost. So even if you're not running destroyed decks and you have like this extra spot, you don't really know what to do with it. I would say for now, you could maybe even toss in a Nova and see if people will activate it for you. Obviously, if you are running Nova, you want to have your own activations, but it's something to think about if you want to be that cheeky bugger that just runs a Nova without no activations. Next thing is Sunspot. So if we go back to the location itself, it states you have to skip a turn to destroy your rocks. So there's probably going to be a lot of turns skipped in this game. So you want ways to capitalize on that. One of the easiest ways is to run a Sunspot. Sunspot, since it steals or absorbs the unspent energy, right? The energy that you spend skipping your turn is not going to be wasted. It's going to be absorbed into Sunspot, so you are still getting a little bit benefit. So that's definitely an easy, brainless addition. A lot of people are going to have the same thoughts. So Sunspot's going to be a card you want to think about when making your decks or designing your decks to deal with the location. Next thing we have armor. I think armor is going to be very, very good in this location. Very strong, very powerful. This card's already too good, but they keep adding destroy synergy cards. So armor just like, hey, I prevent all of that, and it's no joke here. One really nice tech you can do is if you get armor on 2 and the location isn't revealed yet, what you can do is you play your armor on the 3rd location. So on the unrevealed location, and if that location ends up being Collapse Mines, you're gonna fill your board with rocks. They're gonna fill their board with rocks, but you have an armor and they don't. And it's even better than that, right? Because it says that to remove the rocks, you have to destroy them. Armor says, no, 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 no. I'm not. You're not destroying nothing. So they're locked into this 4 rock location, and you also locked into this 3 rock location. But you have armor, so you have this 3 point advantage. Pretty much secures that lane for you for 2 mana. Pretty disgusting, honestly. And I'm gonna be using this strategy a lot. So it's something you definitely want to be thinking about when you're making decks. Like the fact that if people are running armor, they can like force you to have those rocks. You can't skip a turn and negate that effect. It's going to be really interesting in this feature location how people adapt to that. So definitely a card you want to be thinking about when you're deck building and you want to be abusing in this particular location. So yeah, definitely a really strong card, and is, it has these insane synergies here, especially with this location. So definitely a card to be thinking about. Next up, we have Falcon. So I think this card not a lot of people really play with or use or think about, right? So it's not that popular of a card. There are some decks that use Falcon, but it's pretty niche, I would say. So, but it has an Unreal Effect. Return your 1-cost cards to your hand. That's actually pretty good, pretty powerful here. Where instead of skipping that turn that you have to do, you can just play the Falcon. You get your the 3-point power, plus you get the rocks in your hand. That's going to depend on how many cards you have in your hand already, right? So if your hand's kind of already overflowing, then you're not going to get all the rocks out, but you're still going to get a couple rocks into your hand. You can manipulate things, so you don't have to skip your turn. You can get rid of the rocks in such a convenient way with Falcon. So I think this is a card I don't think a lot of people are thinking about, but has some applications, especially in a feature location like this, to actually be pretty surprising. Right, it's a card people are not going to expect. So definitely something I would think about when you're designing decks. How do I take advantage of a card like this? Next up, we have Patriot. So I think this one is also fairly obvious. A lot of people are going to be like, "Oh, I'm going to make a Patriot deck." And I think that's fine, perfectly fine. Patriot's probably really good here. You don't have to skip your turn. You can utilize the rocks. You can make them really big, really strong, and really contest a lane without having to really put any minions on that lane itself. So I think Patriot's going to be pretty popular. Definitely something you're going to see quite a bit during this feature location. And I'm a decent Patriot fan. I'm not gonna say I'm a Patriot, but like, yeah, I'm a decent fan of this card, and it has good synergies and it works here. So I think this is a card you want to be thinking about when you're designing your decks. Next up, we have Cosmo. So this is interesting. Cosmo, why Cosmo? I think Cosmo, first of all, is just a good boy, and put it in every deck. Really, I don't really have a problem with that. But I think here, due to the nature of how this location works, right? One location's always going to be filled, and that's actually pretty cool in that it limits their counterplay, right? They want to be killmongering if they're playing death. They want to be, using their on reveals. If you drop this Cosmo in the right time, right location, you could just negate all of that. Just say, oh, you wanted to killmonger? Oh, now you can't. You wanted to play your Silver Surfer? No, now you can't. Right? You want to buff blah 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 blah. Right? Whatever. Right? Cosmo, I think because you're already locking down the location, making it harder for them to evade your Cosmo, it's going to be a lot easier to get this to give you good value. So I think this card's going to be actually pretty powerful, and can really like annoy people if done correctly, if done right. This is definitely a thinking card, which people don't like to do in this game, I've noticed. But if you want to put in the effort, I think Cosmo is very exceptional here. Next up, we have Killmonger. This is a no-brainer. People don't want to skip their turns, like, hey, skip a turn, kill your rocks. No, I'm gonna do it myself. Killmonger. And then also they clear your rocks too, but honestly, that might be even better for them since they're probably running death and whatnot. So yeah, I definitely think this is gonna be a very popular card. You know what stops that? The good boy. But if you don't want to run that, you can just Killmonger your own stuff and just go from there. Why skip a turn when you can just eat the rocks? That kind of thing. So yeah, very very probably popular card in this coming days, so just watch out for that. It means, it means things like the Sunspot, right, are going to be something to keep in mind, right? Like you want to protect it with armor, things like that. So definitely keep that in mind when you're making these builds that, oh, people are going to be running Killmonger and things like that. Next thing we have Khazar. Hey, it buffs rocks. I mean, it's simple as that, right? Like it buffs your rocks. You don't have to do anything really. You just play the Khazard, buffs your rocks, you're good to go. The four for four style line isn't the worst thing in the world. When you add the rocks, it's 448, so it becomes pretty decent and wins the location if they're ignoring it completely. So pretty good. Same concept. Blue Marvel. It's just, hey, I buff everything, but it includes the rocks, so you don't have to. You can play both of them, right? You play the Khazar and the Blue Marvel. Now your rocks are giving you 2 power each. You could honestly play the Patriot, Khazar, Blue Marvel. That's a bit overkill, but it does work, right? If you really want to dominate that rock lane, so definitely some options there if you don't want to remove your rocks. So obviously you can just skip a turn, but that's really big tempo loss. So you want to find a way to either take advantage of the rocks or mitigate that skip turn. Sunspot's a way to mitigate the skip turn. Blue Marvel Khazar is a way to buff the rocks and make them work for you. Claw. Now this is also another card I don't think a lot of people are thinking about when you're making your decks, but I think cards like Claw are going to be really decent because you get to sneak in power in a lane that doesn't deserve it, or is it like that you're not thinking about, oh, they're gonna sneak power in, right? So with the Claw, even if the location's full of rocks, you just claw the rocks and bam, now you've got 6 power. Deals with a Blue Marvel, deals with a Khazar if people are doing that. So you get a way to sneak in that power and get good points on a location that's might be difficult if you're not skipping turns to get points in. So I think same thing with Mr. Fantastic. It's a cheaper option. 2 points in if they're not wanting to skip your turn or don't have any way to buff their rocks. That 2 points could be pretty good. The problem with the Mr. Fantastic is if that's your only way of buffing, right? Turn 6 they can easily play any Blue Marvel because or any of that, and then your location you think you've won, now you've lost, right? Where with Claw, right, even if they try to Khazar turn 6 or Blue Marvel turn 6, you're still going to be ahead by 2, so it's a little bit better in that regard. So definitely something to think about when you're building your decks, designing your decks. Next up, we have Infinite. So Infinite is like married to Sunspot. I don't know if you know this lore, but that's actually the case where they actually have a thing together. But yeah, if you're running Sunspot, having it Infinite in your deck is not necessarily a bad idea. You're going to be wanting to skip turns anyways. You could do something like Electro on 3, skip turn 4, place Infinite turn 5, right? And things like that will be available to you here where it doesn't feel like you're throwing, right? And your opponents might not be like, oh, they're playing Infinite because they skipped. They're like, oh, they're just clearing their rocks. It's not going to be as obvious to them what you're planning. So it's definitely a card to be thinking about when you're designing your deck and how you want to be making things pop. And then next up, we have Death. Death is going to be very strong with Killmonger, with all the Destroyer shenanigans coming up. Anytime there's a Destroy location, I just kind of put Death in for no reason, just because, like, oh, you're destroying, I'm just going to get the payoff for free. So, I mean, a single Killmonger on both rocks is going to kill 8 things. So that turns Death to a 1-cost card with a single Killmonger. Like, that's too good to deny. So definitely think you're going to be seeing a lot of Death play, and hopefully you're prepared for it. Next thing up, right? I don't have this card, but She-Hulk, right? So definitely think that is another card that you want to be thinking about. She-Hulk costs 1 less for each unspent energy. So if you're skipping turns, She-Hulk's going to get a lot cheaper, and you can drop this down. So definitely another card that you want to be thinking about in your decks if you have it. pretty good in this location. Lets you skip without thinking you're wasting your time. So that's another card to be thinking about in your deck design. So we'll see. Now, that's not all. I do have these 13 cards to think about, but I also have some example decks for you to look at, think about, see if you want to copy it and then readjust, or not copy at all, or just get some ideas for how I think about deck building, right? Because a lot of times if you watch the stream, I kind of play the same deck. But I'm a deck builder, if I'm being honest. But I just, you pick a deck and you move on and with your life with this type of game. But the first one, we have a Patriot Surfer. So you're gonna need Surfer. I want to say before we get started on deck ideas, and this is pretty much always the case for feature locations. Honestly, you don't have to change your deck. You really don't, because you're only seeing it 40% of the time. So if you're going all in on that location that you're only seeing for 40% of the time, that means 60% of the games you're not going to see it. And if your deck doesn't function 60% of the time by design, it's just not a good deck. So hot locations are a little bit different, where since it's 60% locations, you're 60% of the time you're going to see the location. You do want to have some fallback for the location, because if people play into the location and you don't, 60% of the time you're going to be behind. That's not really that great compared to this 40% of the time you'll be behind. So I would say feature locations, honestly, you don't really have to play into them. And a lot of times you can mitigate their effect by having a location destroy, or a lot of times just armor, since there's so much armor, so much destroy locations they keep introducing. So just want to start that off. You don't actually have to change your decks, but if you do, if you want to have fun with the location, you want to enjoy abusing some of the mechanics, here's the first one. We have a Patriot Surfer. You will need Silver Surfer, so this is kind of a limitation there. As well as, like, there's pool 3 cards in almost all the decks I've introduced. I haven't put a pool 2 deck in. If you're still in pool 2, honestly, don't even worry about it. Just play whatever. It doesn't. Don't even worry about it. But for most people in pool 3, right, this is an option. It's a Patriot deck. Run Silver Surfer. You don't have to run Silver Surfer, but the deck will have to change a little bit. So here you're running kind of, it's not a destroy package, but there's a Bucky and a Carnage, since you can just run that in here. But most of the time you're going to be going Patriot, Mystique, Blue Marvel, and then a bunch of good 3-drops, Brood and whatever, and then you Silver Surfer on the end, or you Patriot Mystique on the end. Another thing I've teched in is a Rogue. I think a lot of people will be running Patriot. I think a lot of people are running Khazar, Blue Marvel, things like that. So I think this Rogue tech is going to be really good. Also, Rogue's still good for Zabu. Like if you're in high elo, Darkhawk still runs around. So I think there's still going to be a lot of good targets for Rogue. So I just think Rogue's going to be a really good tech for this particular location. And even if you don't see the location, I still think there's enough ongoings that you want to steal that Rogue just makes sense. Next up, we have got a Dino deck. So this was initially a counter deck, but then as I was like making it, I was like, it's more of a Dino deck. So it's Dino. You've got Dino Moongirl. I think that's pretty common. But the uniqueness of this particular deck, first of all, is we're running Mojo, because I think there's going to be a lot of single lanes that are full, because you're going to have a lane that just has 4 rocks in it a lot of times, and you're not going to play into the rocks, right? So things, lanes are going to get contested pretty easily. So I think Mojo is actually going to be pretty good turn 6, turn 5, to just like, hey, I'm getting 8 power for 2. Another thing, you have Collector, right? This Dino decks sometimes run Collector, but I think Collector is really good in this particular scenario, because the secret tech, right, of this deck is the Falcon. So because Falcon puts cards back into your hand, you can play Falcon turn 6 with your Dino on the board. Those rocks are going back into your hand, and you're just getting like 8 power for free, right? So because of that, our Dino is going to be our carry. We want to synergize that with Mystique. So you play Devilsaur on 5, Mystique on 6 with the Falcon, right? And then the Falcon pull the rocks back in your hand. You're getting +8 power. They're really not going to see it coming unless they've watched this video or this particular deck becomes meta. But yeah, it's going to be a pretty sneaky, hey, +8 to your Dino that they're, that's like, whoa, I didn't, that's going to get you a fist bump for sure. The first time. If it's meta, then no, but like the first time you do it, like, people are going to be pretty impressed. And then we have this Wasp. So because of this Falcon engine, you actually want to empty your hand pretty quickly. So, and also you have Mojo, so you do want to contest boards. You want to fill your location. So the Wasp allows you to fill the location freely. It also doesn't get hit by Killmonger. You're gonna notice I don't really run a lot of 1-drops in these deck ideas because I just think people are gonna be running a ton of Killmongers. So you just want to mitigate that. You don't want to get hit by anything. So if I'm gonna have armor if I'm running the Sunspot, but if not, then or if that's not the core of the deck, then I'm probably going to be avoiding the one. So the Wasp really like that it doesn't get hit by Killmonger. And you can copy it Moon Girl and just drop double Wasp if you need to. And you just have a ton of cheap cards, but also big bombs. And then the Falcon's like the secret sauce engine to really buff your Devilsaur at the end. Getting the rocks back in your hand. Obviously, you're going to lose the rock lane, unless you have an armor in there or something, right? Like if you have armor there, then you can put the rocks in your hand and you're still going to get that +6 power. So that's like, really nice. But generally, if you don't get that lucky, right, you're going to lose that lane. But with the extra power, you should be able to contest the other 2 lanes. So that's the cool idea. Another thing you could do is Devilsaur double Mystique if you don't feel like using the Falcon. So yeah, that's the Dino variant of the deck for the location. Next up, we have Kazoo. So I think Kazoo is still going to be pretty good, pretty strong. You get to use Kazar. You get to use Blue Marvel, which great for the rocks. Only problem with this deck, I would say, is really just people are going to Killmonger you, often. So that's kind of the issue. So you do have to make sure that you're using the armor correctly, right? Making sure that you're playing like if you're playing 1-drops early, you're protecting them with armor. So that's the one thing. I have Titania and M'Baku in just because like I rolled them and I wanna make a deck and put them in. But you can really just put any 1-drop in there to replace that. You don't actually have to be running those particular 1-drops there. I don't think this one's going to be as good because I think there's just going to be too many Killmongers. But if you did want to run a Zoo deck or you have a Zoo deck that you already like and that's like your main driver, you can just still run it. That's all I'm saying. It's just you kind of have to be aware that people might Killmonger you more and more. Next up, we have a Destroy deck. Of course, any Destroy location, you got to put a Destroy deck in here. And so we have one here. One, I mean, I'll get to it at the end, but like it's Hood. It's just a regular Destroy package, with the Carnage, Deathlock being our Destroy engines, and then we have a couple tech options that might be a little bit weird, but let's go explain them. So we have Angel. That might be a little bit weird, but I don't have Deadpool. Deadpool would be Angel if you have Deadpool. So this is like if you don't have Deadpool, you can put Angel in. Things are gonna get destroyed. You're probably gonna get an Angel to pop off at some point. So it's not a bad card here, but I would prefer a Deadpool. But either way, it's still fine. And then here we also have Enchantress, right? Like why Enchantress? I think number one, like Enchantress is actually quite good in this meta. Like there's a lot of ongoing things that are going to be seen, and then another thing is like if they try to deny you with armor, you can just Enchantress their armor, right? Like it's maybe the weakest Enchantress, right? Enchantress your armor, ha ha ha. But it's good if you need to, if you need to kill your Nova or your Hood or whatever. Like it still works. So I do think Enchantress has some value here, and people are gonna be running Patriots, so enchanting the Patriot, enchanting their Blue Marvel, all that stuff, and you really don't get hurt by Enchantress. Right? Sometimes people are running like Zabu and stuff like that, and they can't like Enchantress or Zabu in the same lane, but you don't really have any of that problem. So you can just Enchantress any lane you want. It doesn't really affect you at all. So that's cool. And then also we have the Nightcrawler tech. So this is a pretty interesting tech here. I don't know if a lot of people think about this, but you can put Nightcrawler on the either the middle location turn one or the right location turn two, and then if you hit the rocks on either any correctly with the Nightcrawler, you can move the Nightcrawler away and then Carnage all the rocks. So you end up getting the 8 power Carnage, which is the Nightcrawler moving. So it's just like a cool tech. If you're gonna be running Carnage, I think Nightcrawler in this location is pretty good, pretty powerful. You get to fish for the rock location. If you hit it, then you can Carnage away all of that. Even if you don't hit it, you can move your Nightcrawler and then play a bigger card later, turn 6 or 5 or whatever. So it lets you just contest that rock lane without having to invest too much resources. You just invest that 1 power Nightcrawler. So I think this is just a cool tech that you can put in because of the location. That Nightcrawler lets me get this Carnage eating so much, eating very good all the time. And then leader, I think you're going to be able to um, play both death and leader turn 6 pretty easily, right? If you Killmonger both all the rocks, right? Your death already costs 1, and you just have to Carnage 1 card or Deathlock 1 card, and then it costs 0. Then turn 6 you can death plus leader. It's hard to contest, like the power of especially if other people are also playing death, right? Like the leader just says, "Oh, you're playing death. I'm also playing death. Plus your death, plus leader. So you lose." And I snap. So here's AQs for me. Like so, yeah, I definitely think this is gonna be annoying. I don't want to fight really any of my decks that I've created. So, yeah, but yeah, and then the Moon Girl, you just double your death for 0. Like that's gonna be obnoxious. So yeah, like this is gonna be this is gonna be a pretty good deck if played correctly. So definitely think it's something you can run. And then we have a couple more. We have ongoing. So this is where the claw comes in, where it's just an ongoing deck with some unique tech. Ebony Maw I think is going to be pretty okay here because you can just put it on the left and the mid, put it in the right or the middle, and if you get the rocks, it's 7 power contest. It's hard to contest without like putting significant effort in, so you can just put that in. Another thing we're running is this Invisible Woman. So you play this Invisible Woman and you can sneak in Ebony Maw without having the drawback because it's not active yet. The Ebony Maw isn't on the field, so you do have to play Invisible Woman on 2 and then Ebony Maw on 3 immediately, right? Because after turn 3, you can't play the Ebony Maw. But if you played on turn 3, then you get the 7 power without really any downside. Mojo, for the same reasons, there are going to be full locations because you're going to be locked into 2 for a lot of the game unless people are skipping like turn 3 or immediately. Armor, sales, very, very good ongoing card. We have the Mr. Fantastic that we talked about. If they're not contesting that rock location at all, this Mr. Fantastic can just win it for you. Cosmo, the good boy, and Kazar is like kind of weird, right? It doesn't really fit. But even if it's not the future location, it's still a 4 power ongoing that you can buff with Spectrum. And if the feature location's in, then this is a really good card. Then we have Iron Man. Just if you're playing ongoing, it's between Claw, Professor X, Iron Man. You can kind of swap between the three, but I prefer Iron Man in this particular location, particular situation. And then we have Spectrum, of course, and Onslaught, of course, for ongoing. So something nice is Claw Onslaught, right? 12 power on the right location with the rocks. Like, good luck dealing with that. If you're not, unless you're a Patriot, then never mind. I guess you would. But if you let's you put the Khazar as well with the claw. Now you're actually tying, with the Patriot player Copium. Well, that's actually, well, I mean, regardless, but like you actually win if they're not like going hard with the Patriot buff. But yeah, so this is just an interesting ongoing deck. If you like ongoing builds and you want to play with something like that, this is like my brew that I've done here. And then we have two more decks. So these ones use Zabu and She-Hulk. So that's kind of the downside of these two. So they're not really easy to acquire these cards, right? Zabu, I think a lot of people do have, but She-Hulk, no. But if you have Zabu She-Hulk, then and I guess Agent Colstein for this particular list as well. Then be my guest. So this one's more not. This is more like a meta deck that I just think works in this location pretty decently, right? You have the She-Hulk. I I added armor, so there was an armor before, so you have armor in there too, and you just have like good cards. Not good cards, but like card generation for your Devil Sword, and then you have the Moon Girl to copy things. You do also do the Agent Colstein. You don't like Colstein's not like 4. I would say you don't have to run it, but it's in there for sure. So definitely something you can think about running. Don't have the She-Hulk, but that's the missing piece here. And then the next one as well is more of a Ghost Rider variant where you get the Infinite in as well. You get the Sunspot armor, and then you can Lady Sin the Death or the Infinite or the She-Hulk, and then you just Ghost Rider it back onto the lane. You also have Jubilee to summon big stuff. You also have Wave if you want to do Wave, She-Hulk, Moon Girl stuff. So there's a couple of options here in terms of how you want to maneuver this particular deck in. But yeah, definitely a cool deck if you have the card. So that's what is it? 7 different decks for you to take a look at. So I guess we're gonna go through them one by one in terms of you just need the deck list. So this one's the Patriot Surfer. This one's the Dino Counter. This one's the Kazoo. This one's the Destroy. This one's the Ongoing. This one's the She-Hulk Dino. And this one's the She-Hulk Ghost Rider. So definitely some cool cards there. But that's all that we have today. Definitely a long one, but all my videos are kind of long because I want to be thorough. But yeah, take care of yourselves. Hope you guys enjoy the location. Hope you guys have fun with it. And I'll see you all in the next one. Yuppers. All right, bye-bye.